Well, thank you for those chimes. What a perfect start for our gathering this morning. I hope everyone is staying warm. My name is Cindy Andrews, and I have the honor and the delight to welcome you to one of our favorite events to kick off the new year, the Power of Endowment. So we have over 50 folks joining us this morning. This session is being recorded, and so if that presents a challenge for you, please let us know. But it also is a great reference point. So as you have others that might be interested in the work with regard to an endowment, this might be a session that you want to bring them back to. So again, thank you for joining us this morning. So one of the things that we like to start with, and since we have so many friends in the audience today, it does not need to be repeated, but our mission, connecting people who care with causes that matter. And so if you think of our tagline and our website, peoplewhocare.org, I know I met with a group of high school students at the end of December. We were talking about scholarships. And by the time I left the session, they were literally chanting peoplewhocare.org. And so it is just a great tagline for us, and one that we are most proud of for the last 40 years, connecting people who care with causes that matter. Our vision is for Lorain County to be a thriving community through giving. And so thanks to all of you, the Power of Endowment, and as we get into our discussions around Connect to a Cause, for yes, calendar year 2022. And since it's still January, I can say Happy New Year. We're delighted that you would choose to join us. We do have our core values listed here. I think it's important as we continue about this work to talk about providing the best service to all. And I do mean to all. When you think of over 300,000 residents in Lorain County, how do we embrace our community, always doing the right thing, and certainly continue through a lens of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so as we go through the presentation today, as you hear about our follow-up events, including a 2-day session with the Racial Equity Institute. I'm sure Britt will close with that. But as you think of your calendars, February 15th and 16th, you are all welcome to join us. We have about 10 open seats left. And if you would just send Britt an email, again, our Racial Equity Institute and our work around diversity, inclusion, and equity continues. Collaboration, putting self aside for the betterment of the whole. And since I've joined the Community Foundation, and prior to my joining the Community Foundation, that collaboration really has served us with so many community partners. And lastly, in the area of leadership. So we're excited that you would join us this morning. I just have a few opening slides before I turn it over to Laura to get to the topic at hand. Next slide, please. Your Community Foundation, over $165 million in assets. And it really is that power of endowment that has enabled us, and I say us because it really is about the village and all of us coming together in support of our community. $6.8 million in grants and scholarships last year. So can we just give a shout out for all of our community members who continue to support that work? And that's up from 6.2 million the year before. And how impressive, over $100 million in grants and scholarships over a 40+ year history with over 670+ funds. And thanks to so many of you, those new funds doubled in number last year. And so we continue to point to the power of endowment and connect to a cause. Next slide, please. One of the things that I wanted to share with you as we kick off the new year is why would you do business with the Community Foundation? We do know our donors have other places that they can put their funds, other for-profit organizations, and yet it's your Community Foundation that we feel has a powerful knowledge, expertise with local community issues. We represent 34 communities, municipalities, 14 school districts, school endowments, over 600+ funds. And so I would argue from a value proposition and why your Community Foundation over Schwab or Fidelity or some of these other for-profit organizations. The other is our board governance. We have a couple board members on the Zoom with us today. We have a former board member on our panel. And it's that board governance, that local board of directors, 20 people strong, who really keeps us grounded. And yes, that nonprofit status. So as we go back to Connect to a Cause, your donors, your supporters can write one check and support how many organizations. And then we do have an investment committee that looks at the investments that we manage. The investment committee is made up of professionals, both from our board and from our community, who continue to look, maintain, and guide us with those investments. And even more powerful, getting back to diversity, inclusion, and equity, actually, we were the first investor, the first community foundation to take almost $500,000, $500,000 and invest in a local Black-owned business advisory firm. So we are excited to not just talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, but actually build that into the work of our board and the actions that our board took in the end of last year. Our engaged employees, we have a staff of 12. Many of you helped us celebrate Linda's retirement. She retired on 12/31 after 25 years of serving as a senior program officer. That position from a program associate will be posted February 1st for any of you that might know someone who's interested in joining the community foundation. But our engaged employees, we have a staff of 12. We all live, work, serve on other boards, serve on school districts. And so I would say we have a very engaged team, as well as a diverse team representing those many communities. Our evaluation and impact work, Jamie Simonow's on the call with us this morning. Jamie joined us over 2 years ago and really helped us with the rest of our team looking at the impact and the evaluation metrics that we can use to continue to talk about the work that all of you are supporting, but also the learnings and the ongoing coming together to learn from each other in that area of evaluation and impact. And we already mentioned our strong communities. Through programs like Neighbor Up, we've invested in not just the city of Lorraine, not just the city of Elyria, but bringing communities together and listening to our residents. And what do our residents, what would they like to see us do, and how can we continue to impact them? And then, of course, our national standards. We do continue to make sure we have that gold seal of approval. That is a 3-year rigorous process that Teresa, who's also with us this morning, has supported across our staff. And so, Teresa, thank you. And thanks to so many of you for making sure that we continue those high standards. And then in closing, our diversity, inclusion, and equity work. It continues to ground our work. It continues to ground our strategic plan and helping us continue to move forward in calendar year 2022. And so with that, Laura, I am delighted to announce and share that Laura Malone, our development officer, will be leading us through the power of endowment. Laura comes to us with over 10 plus years at AEF, the American Endowment Foundation. And so Laura's background in plan giving and the power of endowment is a perfect person to lead us through this discussion this morning. So again, thank you all for joining us. And Laura, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and welcome everyone to today's discussion. This is my favorite time of the year because we get to talk about the new year and new beginnings and start to talk about the power of endowment and why this matters to organizations, not just for those that are looking to create endowments, but also for those that are looking to grow endowments and really looking at, the future sustainability of their organizations. But also too, as we get further on in the presentation today, kicking off for our Connect to a Cause. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Connect to a Cause, it is our annual crowdfunding event. Last year, we supported over 65 different nonprofits, raised over $270,000 for those nonprofits. All of them had at least a portion of that go to their endowments. But we'll touch more on that in a second. What I wanted to start off with is this power of endowment. And what does that mean? What does an endowment mean? I like to refer to an endowment personally as forever funding. The idea that those monies are invested and that a portion of those dollars come back to the organization on an annual basis for their continued use. But because of an endowment and because the organizations are not rating the principal of those endowments, they are purely taking those distributions off of the investment returns of those endowments, that money is designed to last into perpetuity. So what that means for an organization is starting with, a gift as small as $100, and we had organizations that did that last year in preparation for Connect to a Cause. You can begin to create an endowment. The principal does need to reach a $10,000 minimum before those distributions can come back to the organization, but the organizations also have up to 5 years to reach that benchmark. And we do see a number of organizations that are in that 5-year cycle that are building up that bandwidth to be able to get to that distribution stage. I would say of the 10 new endowments created last year by our Connect to a Cause participants, there's probably about half of them that are still in that building capacity phase. Some of the other ones have had the generosity of their board or have had surplus resources to be able to get to that $10,000 threshold already, but a lot of them are still in that accumulation stage, which is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's great to start small and get things started. As we talked about, the money is invested by the community foundation, and we'll talk in a little bit and elaborate a little bit more on what Cindy said about our investment committee. After the first anniversary of that principal balance reaching $10,000, there can be up to 4.5% distributed back to the organization on an annual basis. What's helpful with that concept is that not all of that needs to come back to the organization. The organization always gets their ability, typically the first of the year. Many of you that have endowments with us have probably gotten your request forms already asking about what you want to do with your funds this year. But you definitely have the ability to take that distribution, to use that distribution now. If you don't feel like you need that distribution, you can put that distribution back into the principal to continue the growth of your endowment. But what I actually like best, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I think, in the panel, is the available to spend. And the available to spend is that middle ground. It's your 4.5%. You're not taking it out now. You're not putting it back in the principal. It's staying in this available to spend bucket. So you can utilize that as needed. And it's not, by drawing down from the available to spend, you're not invading your principal, but you're allowing that to grow so that you can have a resource as a backup bucket if you need it. So we do have some organizations that have a sizable amount in their available to spend because they just never know when they may need those resources. I spoke to a nonprofit leading up to this discussion, and they're heavily government funded. They have, 6 figures in their available to spend. And part of that is because they just never know when those government rules are going to change, when their funding might be pulled out from underneath them, and they want to be able to know that they have a significant resource to fall back on if they need to. So the available spend is still earning interest, that's staying within the principal, but it is something that's accessible in a larger amount than that 4.5% that they've accumulated. It's that midterm savings account of sorts. And all of this, within your fund and the future income of the fund is that permanent source of income for your organization. Like I said, that forever funding that helps you and your organization. What this looks like is, with that investment, with that growth, with those distributions that may take place, we're just going to assume that an organization may have a $100,000 fund. Like we said, some of these can be as small as 10,000. Some of them are significantly larger. But we're going to use the round numbers of 100,000. That in year 1, the organization created a $100,000 endowment. By year 25, that 4.5% distribution that's gone out to them has equated to just over $130,000. But what's great about that is they still have that principal that is invested. They still have that principal investment balance. And that is over $137,000. So almost as much as they've taken out of the fund, they've still been able to maintain in the fund as investable balance to be able to continue to grow that endowment over time. Fast forward again to year 50. And now we're looking at even more. While that investment balance is $188,000 and change, they've actually been drawing down from that 4.5% over $300,000 over that 50-year period. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind, that that income is still coming to you. But once again, you're not rating that principal. That principal is still growing over time, so that you can continue to have those resources 50 years, 75 years, 100 years into, the future of the organization. And that is something that we'll talk about in a little bit, that is very important to not just the organization and the board, but also the donors that you collaborate with as well. Why with the community foundation? Cindy spoke before about the idea of our investments and the fact that we have, the buying power of that $165 million. So that allows us to be able to enter into investments that smaller organizations may not be able to enter into on their own. We have, a best-in-class investment committee that serve as, community leaders, folks that are in this space. They live, sleep, eat, and breathe within this investment space. Some of them have already managed large endowments for other institutions. Some of them are practicing within the management of investments themselves, that are helping to give our board and our investment committee guidance on these resources, and the ability to go ahead and really be able to, have those returns stay in the community, stay vested in the community, and really leverage that capacity of that local touch and feel of the community foundation. And we'll hear more about that as we go through. I want to take a moment now to introduce our panel and thank them again for their participation today. I'm going to rattle off quickly their names, but I want to allow them a moment to do their own introductions. So we have Jenny Arntz, the Executive Director from Main Street Wellington, Sharon Furcron, who is a board member for the Lorain County Urban League, and Paul Baumgartner, who's the Executive Director for the Lorain County Free Clinic. Jenny, why don't you go ahead and start with just a little bit more background about Main Street Wellington and your work with your endowment.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you for including me with this panel. So I have been with Main Street Wellington for about 6 years, and I'm probably the perfect example of, or our organization is a perfect example of knowing that we have an endowment, but really struggling with that. How do we grow that and not hurt our operating? And so there's that turmoil. But this past year, we actually we had kept our interest on hold or as available to spend for the past probably about 3 years, just in case. And thankfully we did, because we did take a pretty large sum out to help us with our operating funds because of the struggles with the pandemic, which everyone has been dealing with. But I'm still, and I mentioned to Laura yesterday, we still have to really put more focus with our board and also our donors and volunteers to understand the power of the endowment. So I am still in that learning phase, like many of you. But if we didn't have it, if we didn't have folks in our organization, we were created in '98. If they hadn't have started that endowment years and years ago, we probably would have had to have shut our doors last year. So what better event to push us forward, to take it really more seriously, and to hope that we never have to do that again, but to be prepared.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Sharon, how about you?
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Furcron. As she mentioned, what she didn't share with you, that my relationship with the Community Foundation is over 14 years. I started out on their African American Community Fund, and then transferred to the board, and now I'm part of the Grants Committee. So not only am I speaking as an endowment holder, just understanding the discipline that is the Community Foundation when it comes to investing the monies that have been trusted to them. I am currently the vice chair for the board of directors for the Lorain County Urban League. And our endowment is relatively new, and it came from discussions on how do we ensure, to Jenny's point, that our that our organization continues to exist and is able to continue to help people throughout. So whether we're in a situation where we have a lot of active donors who are able to support the cause, or if we get into a situation where they dry up because of something that's going on in the community, we still then have funds to be able to continue to serve. So that's it.
Great, thank you. Paul, how about you?
How's that? Can you hear me
There
now?
we go. Now we got
Okay.
you. Thanks.
All right, I'll start over. Okay. Paul Baumgartner, Lorain County Free Clinic. I've been the executive director there here at the Free Clinic since 95, so it's 26 years. Back in 2001, we developed a strategy to move forward to create endowment funds. We originally put together an endowment board internally at the Lorain County Free Clinic, made up from the board of directors. And we still have that to this day. But then by 2002 or 3, we contacted Community Foundation and established a very small endowment. I believe it was $10,000 or $15,000. And then in 2008, a donor, a very generous donor in the community, asked if we had an endowment, and if so, what would you like to have another fund? And so she established, made a substantial gift to the Free Clinic, with the stipulation that annually we take and distribute that money and put it towards our prescription drug line item to help pay for the cost of expensive medications for our patients, which many of our patients they have at least one or more chronic conditions, things like asthma or hypertension, diabetes. And as we all know, some of the costs of these types of drugs can really put a dent in somebody's personal budget if they don't have health insurance or medication or pharmaceutical coverage. So that is the history of ours. We for the first endowment that we do have, every year we just reinvest that money in the one, and then the other one held at Community Foundation, we take out and we apply that towards our medications. It's been a great relationship with Community Foundation. Still learning a lot about growing the endowments that we have, and having those conversations with the appropriate people within the organization.
Great, thank you. And Paul, if I could continue with you 1 second, we had what are some of the ways that you've been working, with your board to try and start talking more about the endowments, or what are some of the things that you have said to your donor base in regards to why these endowments are important to the Free Clinic?
Well, first and foremost, I think the endowments are important to the Free Clinic because it holds the promise in the future of sustainability in the event that we would need that. But back in early 21, or maybe it was even 20, everything is a blur now, but we started to have conversations at the board level about growing the endowment and taking the distribution more seriously and applying it towards our operating. But it was, the prevailing thought is that we've got to, when we start to take distributions, we have to apply it towards something that's very tangible. So for instance, we can demonstrate to our donors in the community that, for instance, we do use it for medications for people that have diabetes. We use it to buy prescription glasses or eyewear for patients that don't have vision coverage, so that we can show them that hey, there is something that we're really putting this money to good use, and people are getting the care and the level of service that they need. So it was very important that the free clinic, when we do start to take this distribution a little more, that we provide some case in point to show our donors that this is the way it's being used. We always, when we have conversations with donors, major donors, or even if it's just in a general sense of things within a newsletter or maybe a Facebook post, we make it clear that our endowments are going to be around for a long time, and this is an option for you to help us. If you'd like to help us in perpetuating our work, here's one option for you, and here are the 3 funds that you could invest in, and invest in an organization that's been with this community for going 36 years now. I think that we tell our donors that, hey, we're probably not going anywhere anytime soon, unless it's an act of God or an act of Congress. But we just make sure that there are options to all of our donors out there, whether they want to give it in general, they want to earmark it towards something specific, or put it into the endowment fund.
Great, thank you. And Sharon, you had mentioned that for the Urban League, it's a newer fund. And I think we were talking about the fact when I joined in September of 2001, yeah. That was around the time that it initiated. Do you recall from those early stages when you were looking at getting the endowment fund started, some of those conversations at the board level, maybe some of the concerns that came up from the board, or some of the reasons why, there were pros and cons that you evaluated that helped guide the board, to that decision to make this fund happen?
Sure. So I think the first conversation entailed educating the board on an endowment. And I think that is probably one of the things that is most confusing to folks, and just not understanding, one, how you get it started, two, do we actually generate enough funds to be able to get it to maturity in the time frame. So that was part of it. The conversation was around, when can we start reaping the benefits? But I think what made it really important to us is that we had just come out of a period where our funding was not where it needed to be. And so we were kind of cobbling things together in order to be successful. So we didn't want to find ourselves in that situation again. So as we started to share information about an endowment fund, what it could do, the fact that it goes on forever and ever and ever, and long after we're no longer part of the board, they will still have the ability to help people. And so I think that is what kind of pushed us over into saying, absolutely, this is something that we need to do to make sure we're able to continue to serve Lorain County as we have been.
Great, thank you. Jenny, anything that you want to share in regards to your board discussions with the endowment, or things that you've shared with your donors about the purpose behind the endowment?
I think 2 things. I think it's really key for everyone, and I know it helped us. We had Laura's predecessor come down and talk to our board about that educational piece. What is an endowment? What can it do? There's still that worry of, will this affect our operating funding? But that's really what changed my mind. And I still, again, we're in that phase where we need to really grow ours. But I think that's the first step, is having Laura or another representative from the foundation come and talk to your board. The second thing that has really helped, and I know you're going to be talking about this a lot, was Connect to a Cause. We've been involved both years, and it has really been not really life-changing, but it has been for our organization, just allowing us to have those conversations about sustainability and the importance of giving, and not just to us, but to so many other wonderful organizations that are part of it. So, and I have more to say about Connect to a Cause when you get to that.
Great, thanks. Sharon, I know you guys are just getting started, and I know that you guys have also been active in Connect to a Cause as a way to grow the endowment. Are there other ways that you've talked thus far about how the Urban League can, make efforts to grow their endowment?
So I just want to echo what Jenny said, like Connect to a Cause is what got us started. So the first year with our contributions, that's how we started our endowment fund. And then the next year is how we brought our endowment to maturity. So that really helped us out a lot. So some of the things that we talk about, one, again, is just understanding our donor base and what motivates our donor base. So we use some of the donations from our donors, but we've also had some events. So we've had our anniversary gala and those types of things where we are then taking the funding, or we can take the funding and use it to grow our endowment. We have had folks that leave money to the Urban League in their wills, and then we are able to take those monies as well. We will be able to take those monies as well to help grow our endowment. So we're looking at least on a semi-annual basis when we're looking at our funding, how much money do we have that we can use to continue to increase our endowment, and then of course that's reflected in our payout.
Great. Paul, I know you mentioned ways that you talk about, the endowment helping with tangible items. Is there anything, aside from Connect to a Cause, that you want to share about some of your board discussions about fundraising? I know Jenny alluded to, board visits, and I know that we had one of those visits with your board not too long ago. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would encourage, I got a couple of things here, ideas that just came to mind, but I would encourage all out there that if you're starting to, or thinking about starting your endowment, or you're particularly at any level of evolution with your endowment fund, whether it's been a year or two, or it's been 20 years, if you're, boards change, right? Boards change, visions are changing, missions might be tweaked. But I would encourage everyone at some point to invite Laura to come to a board meeting and talk about the power of endowment and what it means and what it could mean to your organization. I do know that we've been involved with Connect to a Cause since it started in the first 2 years, and it has been. I think that's been the propellant for me to really have more active conversations with my current board about that. And yeah, there's a usual and customary caution. Hey, we don't want to step on the toes of other donors and things of that nature. And that's where we generated the idea that when we do this, it's got to be something really we can get our hands around. Obviously, I think everybody strives to increase their goal for Connect to a Cause. So for this year, for instance, if I had X number, I might want to see a 5 or a 10% challenge or increase in the amount raised. And in doing that, you have to start to plan to do that earlier and start to get that seed planted out there and in your newsletters or conversations that you have with people, your board, your newsletters, whatever, your website, and really take advantage of the guidance offered by Community Foundation, because I think in 2022, we took, what is it, Laura? We took 25%, right? To return to the endowment fund. And this year, we're going to have a conversation about increasing that from 25% to X. It might be 30%, 35%. Based on the growth that we've seen from year one to year two. Another idea that I had, and then I'll turn it back over to Laura and to the rest of the panel, but one idea that you could use is that And it goes hand in hand with perpetual giving and forever funds and things that I'm sure many organizations do receive memorials. So somebody passes away, or it might be an anniversary of somebody that's passed away, but they want to give a memorial or even an honorarium of somebody. We get quite a few of these throughout the year. You could designate those memorials to your endowment fund and let that donor know that, hey, this gift made in memory is going to be perpetuating the work and the mission of your organization. And so that's just an idea. We do that with some memorial monies, but just a way to then connect with your donor, saying, hey, that this donation is going to be around forever, and it's in memory of John Doe or whoever it may be. So,
yeah, I think that's a great point, Paul, is the idea that, especially when you're thinking of somebody's memory and the legacy you want that person to have to be remembered, the idea of that forever funding, the idea of that endowment is a great way to tie that together, in the sense that that person's always going to have a portion of that gift that's going to carry on and continue to support, the organization that they cared about. So I think that's a very valuable point to that. Jenny, you mentioned a little bit with the retraining and with some of the push and pull that you guys have had, with your conversations at the board level. And we talked a little bit about some of the misconceptions that may have been, encountered along the way. Are there other things you can think about that, when you're talking with donors or talking with your board, has kind of come up as kind of a misconception or things that you've learned, in your evolution that has kind of said, oh, well, it's not like that after all, kind of thing?
That is a good question. I think really not necessarily misconceptions. Well, maybe the one might be that it's there and we can never touch it. So having that ability to put them on hold, or the interest on hold, again, to be able to use, has been helpful to the board. It's funny, it almost seems like the endowment is some heavily guarded secret, and it shouldn't be. I don't quite know why. I need to figure that out, but it may come with, we're trying to ask folks to donate and to sponsor and to do all this stuff, and then do we want to hit them with that too? So it's almost like maybe some folks might feel that we're being greedy, and so we need to get past that and really think about, like people have said, sustainability, the promise of the future. We just had in Wellington, our Chamber of Commerce disbanded, and that's really unfortunate. But it's like, oh my gosh. And I even had someone say, well, Main Street's not going to be around forever. And I was like, oh, it was like he kicked me. I was like, no. So it might just be that we need to rethink everything. And okay, I like what Paul said. Maybe when we get a memoriam or a lifetime member, that we say so much of that is going to just go into the endowment. So, we just, again, we're still learning. We've still got to put more effort into it. So I hope that sort of answered that question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, Sharon, before I defer to you, I want to just make mention, if you have any questions, we are going to do questions, from the audience after, we're done with the questions that we already talked about with our panel. Feel free to put those in the chat. Missy and Britt are here monitoring the chat while I'm, talking with the panelists, so they will be able to, convey those to the panelists as we get further along in the presentation. But I just want to make mention, we've got probably about 2 or 3 questions left that we're going to talk about on our end. But if there's anything else that you have that you've heard from the panelists that you want to have them take a deeper dive on or elaborate further on, definitely feel free to put those in the chat so that we can, begin to visit those when we wrap up, the couple questions that we have left. So Sharon, you did touch already a little bit about some of the misconceptions that you had, when the board was having some of those conversations. Given your tenure, not just with the Urban League, but, with, other endowments, what have been some of the other things that you felt that you've had to clarify with, donors or board members or other folks that you've conversed with about endowments?
So before I go into that, Laura, let me just go back and touch on a couple things that I heard in terms of ideas for fundraising for your endowment. Paul mentioned, honorariums. We've actually had folks who, instead of asking people for birthday gifts, they've asked them to donate to an endowment fund. So that's an idea as well. But what I think we also miss is the opportunity for folks that donate, if they work for a company that does matching funds, right? Make sure we are communicating that you can have the match sent to your organization as well. So let's not miss that really, really critical point. And I think for most organizations, they have a pretty high threshold in terms of what you can donate to an organization in a year. So that's something else that we like to take advantage of, is anyone that has matching funds, we like to do that. I tell everybody that the Community Foundation in general is the best kept secret in Lorain County. In my 8 years on the board, I wanted to make sure people understood the asset that we have there. And that's the same thing I would tell you about an endowment fund. I personally have an endowment fund. Our family wanted to recognize the interests that were important to our parents, so we have one there. But I think the biggest misconception is that you have to take the distribution every year. I think, and you hit it at the very beginning, that it can be put in a hold status. If you don't need it right then, you don't have to take it. And it can continue to grow until you get to that period where you have a specific project that you want to do, perhaps a capital investment, and you need a little bit more money. It's there for that. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is you have to take this money every year.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I want to, touch again, you bring up a fabulous point about the corporate matches. And, I did a newsletter last year talking about that. And it's amazing, not necessarily in a good way, how many donors don't tap into those resources from their companies. There's an astounding number of, I think it's billions of dollars that sit on corporate books that are dedicated to employee matching that the employees don't tap into. So even just, not even from an endowment, but even a general fundraising standpoint, to make sure that your organizations are talking about those opportunities is a great way to help build capacity, because it's not anything coming out of the donor's pocket. It's something coming out of their employer's pocket. And those employers have willingly set aside tons of money for that purpose. And like Sharon said, in some cases, some companies will match up to $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. So, in a lot of cases, it's not a small match. I mean, it can be, dollar for dollar what the employee contributes. So that's a great touch point on, some of those fundraising opportunities. I wanted to touch a little bit on, something that I had heard at one point. I know you guys spoke about Connect to a Cause and the efforts that helped with the Community Foundation. But, Paul, I think you touched on one point earlier on when we spoke yesterday about when you started the endowment with Community Foundation, that there was, there was a leverage point you felt you had in aligning with the Community Foundation for that purpose. Could you maybe elaborate on some of the other ways you feel like the Community Foundation has helped with the endowment, or how that partnership has helped?
Oh, sure. By establishing the endowment program that we have and growing it, although the growth has not been where I think it should be, but that's work that we have to do out on the side. But I think by establishing and then having the endowments and having these conversations in alignment with Community Foundation to other funders. There's not just, two foundations that we receive money from. And I'm sure many of you out there probably have multiple foundations that you seek general operating or program support. But I think the association with Community Foundation and telling them that, we have endowment funds is a sign of strength to funders. It shows that we are fiscally sound and we're worthy of their investment in our mission and in the work that we do. So it just gives a well-rounded fiscal example that hey, we're heading in the right direction with that. I think that the technical support that we receive from the Community Foundation, whether it be for endowments or grant writing or connect to a cause, has been just a wonderful experience. And I would, the Community Foundation and its staff, they're there to help, and they're very wonderful resource, and they can guide you on so many different levels and planes to get to where you need to be, whether it be general support, connect to a cause, or establishing and growing your endowment.
Thanks. And then Jenny, I know there's been a lot of work with the Main Streets, but I think too, I think there's a certain one of the things I've heard before is just the idea of even just the presence of the endowment funds on the Community Foundation website. That sometimes there's donors that find you that might have just been on our site. Have you had any experiences like that where you've kind of picked up some new traction from kind of the unintended visit of somebody at the Community Foundation that came across Main Street?
Certainly, I think just having us associated with so many wonderful organizations, it really gives us quote unquote street cred that we are, like Paul said, that we are worthy. The Community Foundation believes in what we're doing, and so they are helping promote us and everyone. And so, we are a great collective. So we have had some new folks that I nor anyone on our board had known who did give to connect to a cause, and now we have them. They receive newsletters, things like that, and so so my hope is that continues. But it also is so much easier for me to talk about connect to a cause, because I can say, look at all these wonderful organizations. And specifically, we partnered up with our Spirit of 76 Museum in Wellington. And we kind of work together to say, Wellington, we're two of the organizations in this big collective, this crowdfunding. And just having that partner made it a little easier to ask. So I think it's a great event, and I'm so glad that you're having it again.
Great, thank you. We're excited we're having it again. Sharon, any other similar insights that you want to be able to add about ways that you feel like, especially being on both sides as a board member of, the Urban League, but also having been part of, the inner side, the board of the Community Foundation, other ways that you feel like, the Community Foundation can really be a resource to the nonprofits in the community?
Yeah, so I would say that there are a lot of marketing tools, branding tools that the Community Foundation has that can help promote the fact that you have an endowment, draw people to the endowment. I'm looking here now on the Urban League's website, and there's a number of different ways you can give other than just regular donations, right? So I wouldn't know how to process the stock transfer as it relates to going to the Urban League. All that information is on the website. So if you don't have those connections with the Community Foundation, please reach out to them. I mean, they've got some really sharp folks that can help with all different aspects of your nonprofit. So in this particular case, we're talking about endowment, but there's folks that can help you with grants. There's folks that can help you with marketing. So, you know, if you're not taking advantage of the community foundation, you're missing it, right? So I would say, and this is my personal belief, again, from Laura's point, I've been on both sides of the coin, right? So I think that this is something that would benefit and help give a little bit more publicity and exposure for your organization. So if you haven't taken advantage of them, please do so.
Great, thank you. And before you guys do any final thoughts, I do want to try and open things up to questions from the audience and questions from our participants. I know we have a mix of nonprofit leadership as well as board leadership that are present on today's session. And, you know, that's why we've included, you know, Sharon from her board perspective, and I'm sure even, you know, Jenny or Paul could talk about, you know, some of the things that they've talked about on their boards, as well as, you know, from a staff perspective. So Missy or Britt, do we have any questions that have come in from anybody as of yet? Are we muted?
There's nothing in the chat right now, Laura.
Okay. All right. You know, while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any final questions that have come up through our conversation, you know, Sharon, why don't we start with you in regards to, you know, if there's any final considerations or final thoughts you want to have the audience consider, or things that you know that the Urban League wants to focus on in 2022, you know, what would you suggest, you know, for, you know, 2022 and going forward?
Right. So what I would say is your organization and your participation in the organization is indicative of your passion and your concern about that organization and the people that they serve. An endowment, although I think it just sounds like it's complicated, but an endowment is the best way possible to ensure going forward that those communities are served. I think that sometimes with the smaller organizations, it's a challenge sometimes to continue to get repeated funding, to continue to energize your donors to give. With an endowment, first of all, it's pretty easy for them to give. And secondly, it shows your commitment as an organization to, you know, not only just look at what I'm doing today, but what can happen going forward. And you would always want your organization to experience growth, right? So we don't want it to be the same way it was when we walked in the door. So an endowment is a great way to start to ensure that there's opportunities to grow.
Great, thank you. Paul, anything you want to add to that?
Really quick, we are starting to get a couple questions in the chat, so let's make sure we engage in those while we have you all still. So Mitch wants to know, when's the best time to start an endowment fund?
Well, I don't know that there's a right or a wrong time to start an endowment fund. I think I am going off my experience that we did indeed have some growth in savings and assets on our balance sheet at the time we started to look at that, and we thought, hey, we can start off slow and we can get this thing organized. We can learn about some things and how it works. And so if you have some money that's set aside, we all know, as the question from Mitch or from Elyria Arts Council about, you know, the interest rates are out there, they're pretty low right now. And when you do this investment, you know, it's going to be invested in a different vehicle, which is going to also bring you some growth, or it should. So I don't know that there's a wrong time to do that, but I would just encourage everybody, if you're just at the, you don't have an endowment yet, but you're wanting to try to do that, is to start by having the conversation. Have the conversation with your board of directors. Put together an ad hoc committee if you need to. Set up a meeting to go over and talk to Laura, or have Laura come to you. But it's something that you're gonna, once you have that conversation, then things are gonna start to fall into place. and bring more clarity to the whole process. I did have one other thing to add. When you go into the lobby at the community foundation, there was a rack in there, and there were brochures, right? And I would encourage you to, when you do that you take advantage of those brochures, because that way you can hand them to donors or make them available at your own organization. Or if we ever get out to be able to go out and do presentations again at civic level or organizations, that you can take not only your agency brochure, but you can talk a little bit about that endowment. But we can, Laura, this is a question for you. We can update that brochure, correct? It's been a while, it's sat there for a while, and I think I need to take a look at that and update that a bit. And so if that's possible, let me know.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and we'll touch on that a little bit more at the end of the presentation. But we do have on our website an endowment toolkit, and typically with the same portal that you use to log on for your grant cycle, you can also access those templates to be able to update those documents, or else, Missy or Britt or I can assist you with finding that information and updating that information as well. I did notice in the chat quickly, Paul, while you were speaking, there was the additional question that Mitch had about cannibalizing operating funds when appealing to donors to give to the endowment. And I know statistically I've seen the idea that doesn't happen, that if anything, the folks that are giving to your endowment are giving above and beyond what they normally do with their annual giving. Have any of you experienced one way or the other on that? Just to kind of help with Mitch's question. I mean, do you feel like, in posing the endowment that you're taking away from your general operating, or that or it's adding to the bench strength that you're having with that donor relationship? Jenny, do you want to start with a comment on that?
Excuse me, it's similar. We started lifetime memberships, I believe 2 years ago, and basically lifetime membership for an individual or a household equals 10 years of regular membership. And so there was a little bit of resistance, like, are we worried that, that's all the money we're going to get from that person? And and not too long ago, I was having a conversation with our president, and I looked at our member tree, which is still pretty small. We have maybe 8 lifetime members. And I said, almost every single person on that tree has given extra money this past year. And so again, it's not endowment, but that's an example of, like you said, if you have someone who really believes in what you're doing in your organization, chances are they're going to continue to give, and they might even give more. So
yeah. Sharon, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we haven't had a lot of experience since our endowment is so new. But what we did discuss was creating new donors, right? So we've not necessarily spent a lot of time adding donors. So now we want to focus on opportunities to create new donors now that we have an endowment.
Right. And then I know Elyria Arts Council had asked about, standard savings account, and, which may not have a high interest rate, into their endowment fund. And I think, to be prudent, I'd say that really depends on the comfort level of the organization. The endowment will have higher returns, and if you're already over that $10,000 threshold, you can, put some in and put it in specifically for available to spend. But if you're not over that $10,000 threshold yet, that will be applied to the principal, and that will apply to, the 4.5% distribution back to the organization. So I think a lot of that is going to depend on the comfort level of the organization with how much they have in their savings and how much they feel like they can put into the endowment, or, if they're over, especially if they're under that available to spend, under the principal threshold for the distributions. if they're over that 10,000, then they can definitely put more in available to spend and have that earn that higher interest. But if they're concerned that they may need to tap into those resources, then, you want to be cautious in how you're doing that. Any other questions from the audience?
There was one other question, Laura. Jim's wondering where he can find some examples of outreach materials for asking for estate gifts or memorial contributions.
Right, and
like that?
thank you very much for that. And we'll touch on our endowment toolkit in a little bit with some of those examples. There is some information there. And then also, as Paul alluded to, we're always happy to have those conversations one-on-one to be able to talk through some of those opportunities that come into play with that.
One of the things I'd like to add,
yeah.
in answering just real quick before we move on, is to examples of outreach initiatives that might then loan itself to an estate gift. It's identifying those major donors. If you have, maybe you only have one, maybe you have three, but I think it's very, very important that you cultivate that relationship. I did that for years, and when the individual passed away, she left some money, and you invite those donors to come out to your organization, take a tour. You call and say, personally, thank you for, at Christmas time or holiday time, they might send a large gift, and you pick up the phone and you not only say thank you, but you have a personal conversation with those people, and as many donors as you can, I guess. So that's one way, is just over time, is to grow that relationship with specific donor base on that. The other thing I was going to recommend as far as outreach initiatives, I have two individuals that are one's on my advisory board, but he was a past board president, and the other's my treasurer. But they're both associated. The gentleman on the advisory board, actually, he is from Wellington, but he's a financial advisor, and he works with people that are in retirement. And I think that as an example, if you have somebody like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be on your board, but if you give them the tools, that if a person that they are advising says, okay, I'd like to give something to charity, that person then could act as a representative for you to say, hey, I have a suggestion. I heard you say something about medical care or health care, or maybe it's hunger, who knows? Okay, but to have that person act as your agent. The same with my treasurer. He's an internal auditor at a bank, but he's involved with a lot of different organizations, both regionally and locally. And he has brought back money for the free clinic to help our sustainability. So use those people, those board members, those advisors out there to the best of your ability, so that they can represent and carry on your mission and your message.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would even just add, and I think this was a conversation that we had yesterday as well, is, just making sure, and we'll touch on this deeper in the presentation, but just making sure those resources are available. Paul mentioned the brochures, but even just, there's the ability to link to the endowment fund on your website and put a link from your website to our site for folks to give. And even just, talking about those opportunities that are available can be a great tool. So as we think about, moving forward, and I apologize, Jenny, did you have any other final thoughts before we move on? Okay. As we've talked about already, a lot of this is committing to your future, not just today, but, going forward as we go into these presentations. And, I wanted to, a lot of this was touched on in regards to, it can be that ongoing source of income. It can allow for program expansion. As Sharon mentioned, if you allow that available to spend to grow, That could be something that is the catalyst fund for something new that you want to create or something new that you want to start. We talked about, Jenny mentioned about how it kind of enhanced a little bit of their stability and their prestige to say that they're aligned with the community foundation. But that independence too of, the idea of a lot of the organizations have talked about over the last 2 years that, having the endowment was a great backstop for the idea that they couldn't fundraise the way they used to over the last 2 years. And knowing that they had those resources was a huge benefit for them and their continued success, or keeping them from closing their doors, through these 2 years, and not knowing what we're going to be doing yet is really part of that challenge. So the overall stewardship, a lot of that, as we talked about, relieves the pressure on the annual fund, but it also, can encourage outright gifts. It can, Paul just talked about building that pipeline for future gifts. We talked a little bit about the memorials and the idea of that, adding and aligning with the donor's values and priorities. Sharon was kind enough to talk about the idea of that perpetuity and being able to honor that person in their lifetime through those types of gifts. And the incremental funding, we talked a little bit about that estate planning aspect and the wills. A lot of folks may not have the capacity to feel comfortable with making large gifts now, but they are thinking about it in their estate plan. So, we just had a donor that is part of the Midview School District that has just made us aware that in her estate plan, she's leaving the proceeds of the sale of her house to the Midview School District. And that was something that, had very limited conversations with Midview themselves. But she, knew that that was something important to her. She knew she wanted to be able to support the schools. And, through the work with the Community Foundation and the Midview School Endowment, there's that gift that's going to be coming to them at some point in the future, that's related to that type of gift. We've spoken with other donors that are looking at doing things, within their estate plans and supporting, multiple endowments, 2, 3, or 4 different endowments that are all organizations that are meaningful to them. So being able to make sure that you're making folks aware of these opportunities can be a great stewardship role for the organization, and to be able to participate, in those activities. There's a lot of resources to touch on in regards to what can be given. And I think a lot of times, there's always the nonprofit focus on cash and credit cards. It's easy, it's, quick, it can go right into your bank account. But there's a lot of other opportunities to give, and being able to touch on those resources, to be able to touch on those opportunities. If these aren't things you're talking about on your website, then you should be. And as Sharon mentioned, even if you can't facilitate that, that's part of the role of the Community Foundation, excuse me, and our collaboration with you in this endowment. So, we had a donor that gave, $30,000 of stock during Connect to a Cause. He was on the board of one of the nonprofit organizations participating in Connect to a Cause, and he did that as a challenge grant during Connect to a Cause. We've had numerous donors this past year make gifts out of their IRA charitable rollover and their qualified charitable distributions. I had a donor sit in my office and we worked out the paperwork together, and she supported, her 3 funds at the Community Foundation, as well as, 6 other nonprofits. Not all of them had endowments with us, but, they all were benefiting from these gifts. And that was, in her case, over $10,000 of giving that came from her qualified charitable distribution. Paul talked about the bequests and, the estate gifts that are left when somebody passes away, but also, the idea of beneficiary designations for some of these types of assets. Life insurance, either when somebody passes away, or sometimes people want to be able to do something with their life insurance while they're still living. charitable trusts, real estate, business interests. We've had some discussions with folks talking about the idea of when somebody sells a company, wanting to be able to leverage those assets. And a lot of this is more prevalent than you think from an opportunity standpoint. If you look at, this is information from the IRS data from 2019 in regards to where a lot of the wealth is situated. And, as you can see, just about everybody has a bank account. I mean, 95.4% of people have some kind of bank account. But look at the idea of how many folks have, stocks and mutual funds or equity in a business, or are, key employees of a business where they may have stock in that business, equity in their home that they may want to leverage. The retirement accounts are huge. Cash value life insurance, all of these are assets that are sitting there that, without going too deep down a tax rabbit hole, oftentimes for these donors, it's a lot better for them from a taxable perspective to donate those assets than it is the cash. And the main role of the community foundation is to help you guys with the transfer of those types of gifts, because most organizations don't have the staff capacity to assist with that. So, we are happy to be a resource and talk with you more about these opportunities. Sharon talked about, the website with the Urban League. They, in my mind, and they've done an amazing job in translating how their endowment and how these types of gifts can help their endowment and help their organization. So if you're looking for ideas on how to speak more about this, I definitely would suggest the Urban League's website as a best practice for ways that you can build some of this into the discussion on your website. Also, we talked about the idea of our endowment toolkits. So, these can be great resources to go ahead and where we can help you. Paul and Sharon mentioned the printed items that are created. We have a Ways to Grow flyer that is, Sharon touched on one of those in regards to birthdays and anniversaries, ways that you can increase the giving into your fund. We have the stuff related to those complex gifts that we talked about, bullet points to share on your website or your media about these opportunities to share with your donor base. And we're always happy to help. I'm always happy to be a phone call away, a visit away, whatever resources you need to help you guys grow in this process. I want to take a moment now to pivot just a little bit to Connect to a Cause. And, I want to thank everybody again. First, before we go into that, I want to thank the speakers because I know a couple of you may need to branch off into different things. So I want to thank Paul and Sharon and Jenny, and you're more than welcome to stick around. But, if you do need to jump into some work items, then please feel free to do so. But thank you very much for your roles today. But as we begin to talk about Connect to a Cause, I want to just remind everybody of just what a great event it was for 2021. Over $277,000 raised on September 16th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. All of that going to 65 different Lorain County nonprofits, 3 of which were on our call today. So, I want to just thank everybody for their participation. This was not a job done alone by the Community Foundation. Each of the participating organizations played their own role in promoting. Jenny talked about her collaboration with Spirit of 76 Museum. If some of you didn't see Paul on TV that morning talking about the free clinic and Connect to a Cause, the Urban League has some great social media that they put out there to promote the day and promote what was going on with Connect to a Cause. So this really is a combined group effort in that success. And we're happy to unveil this again in 2022 on September 15th. I want to also acknowledge and make mention of our business champions. This event could not have had the success it did without those business champions. The support that came from these business champions helped to give each organization a 17% increase in their fundraising efforts. With that money from the business champions, every dollar raised by the nonprofits was matched with 17 additional cents. So, and that is, indicative of the previous year as well. So, the funds that come from our local businesses in support of Connect to a Cause do a huge amount of benefit to all 65 nonprofits. And we would be in debt, grateful for them for their continued support, and are so grateful for Ross Builders and Kids Smile, who have already jumped on board and made their commitments for 2022 to serve as a business champion. So we're looking forward to the growth of that, the ability to create more match dollars through those business contributions, and maybe even some other special prizes and awards to the participating nonprofits through those business champion funds for 2022. For those of you that have participated in 2021, there's not much different this year. So a lot of the same guidelines all apply as 2021. For those of you that are considering this for 2022, we do have an online application process. If you have received grants from us in the past and have gone through our grant making cycle, you can use that grant login to our grant makers portal to access that information and access that application. We do ask that all registrations are completed by March 31st. Anybody that does or does not have an endowment with us can register by March 31st. If you have an endowment already, you're done with the process until the summer when we start the marketing planning. If you don't already have an endowment with us, because we know that sometimes that can be numerous conversations with board leadership, a lot of things to consider in that process. You do have from March 31st to May 31st to complete your new endowment. So if you don't have an endowment and you register by March 31st, but then do not complete your endowment by May 31st, then you'll be removed from Connect to a Cause. But for anybody that already has an endowment, the only deadline you need to focus on is March 31st. Once again, we are asking this year that all organizations contribute a minimum of 25% to their endowment. We believe in endowments. That's the whole reason why we're having this presentation. That's the whole reason why we've created Connect to a Cause. As Jenny indicated, with a lot of other fundraising efforts, it's often common for nonprofits to just lose sight of the endowment. So this is the best way that we can help you make sure that you are still building those endowments while you're focusing on other things. And I will say, I want to acknowledge that we had, of the 65 organizations, we had 15 of those organizations that actually committed all of their resources raised that day to growing their endowment. So you can definitely do anything within that spectrum between the 25 and 100. We had a few other folks that did 30%, 50%. I think Paul was talking about the potential of him, upping his percentage to some amount that they'll decide in the future. But we do ask that at least a minimum percent of 25% goes into that. Similar to the last year, we have two key dates from a training and preparation perspective. The first one is July 13th. That's when we start to kick off all of our marketing initiatives with Connect to a Cause and start to do what we can do to help you with your best practices in preparing for Connect to a Cause. And then September 7th is, basically a week before Connect to a Cause Day on the 15th. So that's all the final items that everybody needs to know for the day of the event. These are sessions that are required for the participating organizations. There's a lot of critical information that is shared during this time. So we want to make sure that everybody is present and everybody gets that information so that they know where and how and what and who needs to happen, through the leading up to Connect to a Cause and Connect to a Cause Day. We're going to open it up now for questions. I do want to say too, if there's ways that you think we can better support you, if you've participated in Connect to a Cause last year or the year before, please feel free to reach out to myself or Missy or Britt with your suggestions. going into year 3, this is still an evolving process. So we're more than happy to, help support you however best that we can in this process. Jenny, I know you had said earlier that you wanted to share some more information. Did you want to chime in before we open up for questions?
I was just going to talk more about Connect to a Cause, and I did kind of share what I wanted. So,
okay.
But thank you. But I guess my biggest takeaway is we, as well as I encourage everyone to try to put endowments a little higher on our priority list.
Great, thank you. And
you're welcome.
And I think, touching to Jenny's point earlier about the collaboration, that she did with Spirit of 76, I know there were a few other organizations that tag teamed, some of their marketing efforts with Connect to a Cause. And I think that can be a great way to be able to, help increase that exposure. I know we've talked before during some of the other lunches or the other sessions about, folks that have used this not just for growing the work of their existing donors, but also, they've gotten new donors through this process. So it's great to be able to, have this as a resource for our nonprofits. And it's great to see, how this is building momentum from year to year. Missy, Britt, do we have any questions from the group? Okay, I do want to take a moment just to see if anybody else has anything that they want to add to the chat from a question standpoint. Please feel free to, jump into the chat and share any questions that you may have. We're more than happy to, help answer anything that you may have that you have heard, either in the panel discussion or related to Connect to a Cause, or, feel free to reach out to Missy or Britt or myself separately in that respect.
Laura, I'll just say that the application is open on our website, and there's a button right on the front page that you can click that'll take you into the grants portal to fill out your application. And if you need assistance, if you've never logged into our grants portal before and need help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be glad to walk you through the process.
And I'll just as well, thank you all for attending. We have really great relationships with all of you, and I know you always reach out to me with questions, so we're always here for any of you. And our other coworkers from the Community Foundation that are on the call, they are more than willing to answer any questions or think through ideas with you as well. So please visit our website and reach out to us. And so up next, like always, we always have something going on at the Community Foundation. So our first nonprofit, other than Power of Endowment, of the year is going to be our nonprofit board engagement. So every year we try to do something for your board, right? Role of the board, how does the board work? How do we get our board motivated? We listen to you all, and that's what you want. How do we get them engaged with the things that are going on? So February 25th, we'll have a Zoom meeting for an hour with our partners at BVU, and that is what we will be discussing. So I put the link to sign up in the chat. It'll be on our website. So please encourage your board members to go. I know we have quite a few board members on the call. And if you're like me and a lot of other people I know, you don't just serve on one board, you serve on many of them. So this is a way that we can get everyone engaged, and we're really excited for that opportunity. And as Cindy mentioned in the beginning, we have our REI Phase 1 training that is happening February 15th and 16th. I know a handful of you have sent me messages and I signed you up. I think we have about 7 slots still available. This is a 2-day, all day long commitment. So I understand if you can't do it on February, we are going to be offering one in September. So please stay tuned to that. And board members, we also want you to be a part. We want as many people in Lorain County to participate in these opportunities so we can figure out how to move forward together.
And we're happy to take any final questions if anybody has anything that they want to share, while we're waiting to see any feedback. Once again, Sharon, Paul, Jenny, thank you guys so much for sharing your feedback and your insights. It's great to be part, as Cindy mentioned, I spent 11 years with another organization that was nationally focused, but it's been so wonderful this last year and a half being part of a community-driven organization and to get to know some of the faces. And I know I still have a lot of faces I need to get to know, but it's been a great time being part of this experience and doing these engagements with you. So once again, feel free to reach out to any of us, along with Missy and Britt on our call. I believe I saw that Jim Stobie and Allison Hawkinson may have answered a couple questions online. They are part of our finance team. Teresa is part of our IT team and, is our guru that helps Missy with some of the tackling things with our IT aspects. But there's a lot of great ways that we are happy to help you. So, feel free to reach out to us at peoplewhocare.org. We all have our pictures and bios up there. We all have our websites up there. As Missy said, the stuff related to Connect to a Cause is on the main page of our website right now, and we'll probably move over to the Connect to a Cause 2022 page as well as the Endowment Toolkit, which is under our resources tab on our website. So I will go ahead and pause for a moment to see if we have any other final questions. And thank you guys again for your time today.
And I do just want
Thank you, everyone.
I just wanted to say really quick, Jamie Seminow is also on the call from the Community Foundation. And if you have any questions, if you're submitting a grant February 1st and you maybe just have a question or want to know which cycle you should be applying for it, Jamie is your person. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.